Welcome to CFO Talk. I'm your host, Steve Rosewald, Chief Learning Officer at CFO.University. Joining us today is Prashanth Southekal, Founder and Managing Director at DBP-Institute, a boutique enterprise data analytics firm based in Calgary, Canada. Prashanth has a mechanical engineering and IT degrees from two national institutes in India, master's degrees from Cornell and Northwestern University in the United States, and a PhD in philosophy from the University of Commerce in Lille, France. When he isn't working with DBP clients, he is an adjunct professor at IE Business School in Madrid, Spain, and serves as an executive data analytics advisor to several companies. He also has written a few books that you'll see behind him in the background when he comes on the screen. Today, Prashanth will be addressing data analytics for finance leaders with our member scholars. Welcome, Prashanth. It's great to have you on the show.
My pleasure, Steve. Thanks for having me in this program.
That's great. We just learned about each other over the past couple of months. I think we were introduced by Jesper Sorensen, and I've really enjoyed a couple of meetings that we've had. You're really finance related. You know how data analytics fits into our world, and so I'm excited to share your word with our member scholars today. Getting things started, if you look at defining what data analytics is, so help us kind of understand that, and then why business leaders today should be interested and embrace data analytics.
Okay, that's a great question. So, there are many definitions of data analytics people are talking about these days. And the reason why we have so many definitions of data analytics is mainly complicated by the technology vendors based on the products and services they are actually selling. So if you look at SAP, where I worked before, they have over 250 different products. So their definition of analytics covers right from ERP all the way to business intelligence and analytics programs. Whereas if you look at SAS, one of the companies which I'm advising, they started more from a statistical background. And their definition of analytics is more towards predictive analytics, machine learning, and so on. If you look at Tableau and Spotfire, their definition of analytics is more centered around dashboarding. Having said this, the common theme about analytics, which everybody agrees, is that it involves some amount of data processing for sure and deriving insights out of it. So my definition of data analytics is using data to answer your business questions to get insights for decision making. So if you don't have data, if you don't have questions, there is no analytics. So that's my definition of analytics.
Great definition. That helps a lot. Do you have more?
Yeah, so and that coming to the next point, why should business leaders be embracing data and analytics? That's the next thing which I want to say is many times I go and say, for example, I was talking to a leader in the oil and gas company, and he was asking, can data analytics help me produce more oil from the ground? The answer is definitely not. The data analytics per se will not help you get more oil from the ground, but data and analytics will give you those insights on how you can do and what you can do to get more oil from the ground. So it's not a replacement. Data analytics is not a replacement for your pump check, but it is a replacement for your knowledge or it's complementing your insights so that you are better informed on how to get more out of your pump jack. So this is where the power of data analytics is, the power of knowledge. That's what it gives.
Yeah. Great. That's a great, I like the idea that it's an energy adder. It's a booster to what we're doing and gives you a lot more options, it sounds like.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Today, some of the highest return applications, or what are the highest return applications in data analytics that you see currently in business, and if in the future you see that shifting to another area, and if mostly the financial applications is kind of what we're focused on. But do you have some specific areas that are really hot right now and there's high returns, and might that change in the future?
Yeah, the first point, Steve, it all depends on the industry type. So you might ask, which are the areas which has got high return on investment? So my first question is, tell me in which industry you are operating. Like, for example, if you look at oil and gas, for example, it is very much asset centric. So your ROI would be pretty much asset based. If you look at telecom, for example, it is mostly on the customer churn. So your ROI would be centered around how I can minimize the customer churn. If you look at healthcare, for example, one of the hot areas these days in the COVID times, so it's more on the regulatory compliance. So your ROI is ensuring that how do you ensure regulatory compliance? If you look at retail, for example, it's on inventory management as one of the top areas when it comes to retail. So the high ROI areas, number one, it depends on the industry type. So coming to your next part of the question, where do I see the future growth areas? I would see off late or probably till 10 years back, data was used mainly for internal reporting. But given the explosion of data which has happened in the last 10 plus years or so, there is an opportunity for companies to monetize the data. That means to take the data which they have and create one more line of service or one more line of business which is based on data. A few years back, I was talking about data monetization in a conference. I didn't have many takers on data monetization. So today, just a few months back, I did a project for one of the biggest oil companies in the world, which is on building data products where they can monetize it. They can take their internal data and sell it to other companies. I'm having conversation with one more oil company in the Los Angeles area, talking about this, asking me about the same areas. How do I monetize this data, which we have traditionally used for internal users? Can I monetize this data and sell it for external people? So things have drastically changed in the last 5 to 10 years in the data world. Leaders are not just looking at using data to provide internal reports. They are also saying, can I take this data and sell it and make money out of it?
That is so interesting, and it's so true. I mean, you think about, there's a company here in Vancouver that just went public called Zoom Info. They used to be called Discover.org, and they went public with one big IPOs this year. And what they do, they're a data management company. They screen and create data for people and then sell it, and they're worth 15 or 16 billion dollars or something, and they're about a 5 or 10 year old company. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, so it's not only the internal uses, but the external value that data can create. And so how do CFOs, how do you see, so there's two issues, kind of using internal data for insight in your company and getting better and making efficiencies and those things that you're talking about, applying it to your assets and compliance issues and all those really interesting industry by industry categories you cited, which I found fascinating. But so the internal part, do CFOs talk a little about the CFO suite and how they're involved in data analytics, how you see them, and in the future, if we're going to start selling data, is the CFO going to become more of a commercial manager if they're managing the data, or how do you see that playing out in the future?
Yeah, so the traditionally the companies have valued physical assets such as factories and land and money as real assets for the company. But off late, given the explosion of data which is happening, data can be a potential monetizable asset as well. There's a lot of people who have written about it, but I strongly believe in this. So overall, if you look at data and analytics, it can do three major things for the company. One is it can help in providing insights, which can help in revenue generation. Next, number two, it can also provide insights to manage your expenses, to reduce your cost and everything. And the last thing is it can provide insights on regulatory compliance so that you have all your regulatory materials or artifacts ready to ensure regulatory compliance. So while revenue generation probably might not be the CFO function per se, but certainly CFOs can play a big role when it comes to expense management and when it comes to regulatory management, especially on the finance side. So this is where I see the way the CFOs can use data and analytics to start with, at least on the visibility they can offer on the expense management, cost reduction, both OPEX and CAPEX, and so on and so forth.
Let's save that for a minute, because I definitely want to talk about specifics of that. But you really intrigued me in the revenue generation side, and how we kind of, how do we recognize, and this is a tough question, so I told you I wouldn't ask any tough, this is going to be a tough question. How do you recognize if you have data that is valuable outside your company? Can you think of somebody who said, hey man, we're doing all this, maybe it's in the oil and gas industry, all this work here in our fields, and we're creating all this data for us, maybe we can sell it. Can you give some example? Is there, a way that we can, how do we know if we're creating and mining data that is valuable outside our entities.
So, but one thing is, the way I would start with with this monetizable journey for data products is look at your whole value chain. How you sell your products and services to your customer. How do your products and services reach your end customers? And then look at the players in the value chain. If you look at the players in the whole value chain, it is extra. On the one end of the spectrum, you have completely external people outside your company. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have your internal employees. But in between the internal employees and your external customers, you have a bunch of partners who could be your dealers, who could be your agents, who could be your commission agents, who could be your vendors, who could be your partners, so on and so forth. So these people are also part of your company itself. Don't treat those people as your a real external people. For example, treat vendors as part of your organization. I'll give you an example. For example, I was working for an oil company, which is almost like a $30-40 billion company. And this company had 100,000 vendors in their database. And the procurement spend for this company was almost $20 billion plus. So just a simple question. When you are spending when your vendors are contributing 20 billion to your business, do you think they have to get the right information so that they can help you better manage your spend? So what is the harm in sharing the data with those vendors so that they can help you, even if 1% savings in that $20 billion is a few $1,000,000 for you. So the first thing is look at your whole value chain and treat those people as partners, as your internal stakeholders as them. Don't look at vendors, for example, as separate outside entities. Look them as part of your internal organization, and then provide them with those kind of insights which can help you leverage the value. One example is, let's assume that you are an oil company. Again, I'll take this example of this oil company, which was into movement of the crude oil from point A to from all the different batteries into this collection point. And who moves this crude oil? It's all these trucking vendors you have. Now they are working for you. So if you are doing all your jobs of collecting the field tickets, the movements and everything, and that data is with you. And how about you share the data with those vendors and give a simple thing. Look, these are the top 10 vendors I have when it comes to carbon footprint reduction, for example. Now other vendors are looking at it and they'll say, why can't I get into that list? Okay, I'm treated well. So now instead of keeping that information internally and just sharing those information about top 10 vendors on carbon footprint and so on and so forth, make it public, share it with the vendors and say, to get that information, pays a small amount of fees, which is part of the data processing, for instance, so that you can look at data not just as internal reports, but even as a monetizable mechanism.
Yeah,
One example. So bottom line here is that look at the whole value chain and look at the people who are part of that value chain and what information needs they have, and see whether the data which you have can supplement those information needs for these players.
That's brilliant. I love that kind of external thinking, making your net bigger by treating them internal rather than externally, because that whole terminology kind of makes us a we they. And you're saying we're all part of the we. There is no they. We're all part of the we. I love it.
In fact, the one main challenge which we have don't worry, even without thinking about the external players, there is huge monetizable and efficiency operations in an organization by just breaking the silos. So it is the silos which are causing inefficiencies for most companies. And those organization silos are actually turning into data silos and everything. So it's the silos which are actually causing poor inefficiencies in most companies.
Great point. Getting a little bit more grounded back to the finance side. We had a great conversation the last time we talked about how you were using data analytics in the cash conversion cycle. So, can you tell the audience a little bit more about that initiative and kind of what you came up with? I found it fascinating. At first, I was a little skeptical. Where does data analytics fit into this?
Yeah.
And you made some really clear points.
Okay, so let's start with the fundamentals. Of course, most of the CFOs know the cash conversion cycle, which has got three parameters. One is your receivables, next is your inventory, the third one is your payables. So let's take two factors in that equation, which is your customer and your vendors, the receivables for the customers and the payables for the vendors. Let's take a simple example. Address. Inconsistencies in the address of your vendor. Suppose you get your invoice for the vendor, and let's assume that you get this invoice from this vendor from Houston, and you see this, okay, but my database says, okay, I have to, this vendor is based in, is based in
Vancouver, Washington. Huh?
Vancouver, Washington. And in that invoice, I see the payment term, which is net 90 days. And in the contract for this vendor, I see the payment term, which is 30 days. So I see that, okay, in a contract, it is 90 days, but the invoice says it is 30 days. So should I act on the contract or should I act on the invoice? So if you have a consistent record where you say it is 90 days, so you save 60 days on that cash flow itself. So imagine, even if you have a cost of capital which is 10% here, 60 days, 10%, and assuming that the invoice is 5 million, you will be saving easily 100,000 plus on the 60 days of saving which you have. So this is on the vendor side. Whereas if you look at on the customer side, okay, I get this invoices. I have to pay I get these invoices from the customer, and the customer is and the customer is paying me for those invoices. But where do I send the invoices? Should I send it to Calgary or Houston? And if the address is inconsistent, just for example, a 4 weeks delay in the address, instead of sending it to Calgary, I send it to Houston, for example. That 4 days times 10% of your cost of capital would again come to a few $1,000s. So if you look at a very simple thing about payment terms and your address inconsistency, will cause you thousands of dollars of loss when it comes to the cash conversion cycle. So imagine if you have more and more data silos, more and more poor data quality, and lack of information which is flowing. So imagine how much money you could potentially save. So data and analytics, in these days when people are talking about optimization, reducing costs, and getting the maximum out of their assets which they have. So there is a huge opportunity for data and analytics to help you provide the right kind of cash visibility.
And what I really heard in that example is kind of the start of data analytics is getting a data management system that is consistent, that you're getting information that is the same. You're able to assess what's right in data that's coming in, even if your vendors are wrong, your invoices are wrong, that you're receiving from your vendors or your payments from your customers aren't right, that you're able to quickly assess that and make a right determination. So the data quality maybe is a really first step, huh?
Oh, absolutely. The master data management is one of the key here. Let's take master data management from Riverside, for example. If you can manage all your tools from in the master data management and send those master data elements to your transactional systems, for example, so this creates a uniform and a single version of truth for your key critical elements, whether it's vendors, products, or customers, and so on.
That's great. What that leads to the next question that I was thinking about is, what kind of tips do you have for CFOs who are kind of embarking on their data analytics journey from a cultural standpoint, building a culture of data analytics? What kind of tips would you give them on starting that journey?
Oh, it's a big question. In fact, the book which I have, my second book, Analytics Best Practices, is about, there are many tips for the for the CFOs. But I would my favorite ones is three things. Number one is try to reduce the dark data in your company. So, but what is dark data? So many companies these days are capturing lots and lots of data, which is often ending up being unused in the company. Like Forrester says that 73% of the data in a company is unused. Carnegie Mellon did a similar research, and they said 90% of the data in a company is unused. So reduce the amount of dark data in your company. So you might ask, hey, this is all unused data. What harm does it do to me? Then let it lie there. But that data is very similar to the junk which you have in your house. So you are actually indirectly paying for it. You are paying for your data processing cost, and that is growing at an average 50% every year for most of the companies. Data processing also contributes to the carbon footprint. So in fact, by 2025, they're saying that 7% of the carbon footprint contribution comes from data centers in the world. So, and the more data you have, you are attracting the criminals, the cyber criminals, to your side. And when they look at the huge amount of data which you have, they don't care whether it's a dark data or bright data or bad data or good data. They go and attack all your data. And in the process, even your good data gets compromised along with the unused data, which you practically don't care. But the criminals don't care whether it's bad data or good data. They take everything which they can access. And the last thing is about privacy as well. So when you have this dark data, there is a lot of personal information of your customers, of your employees and vendors, which you are potentially managing. So you need to protect those things as well. So dark data has to be treated very seriously by many companies, including the CFO, as part of the C-suite leadership, and reduce that footprint. That's number one. Number two is about improve the data literacy. And how do you improve the data literacy? Is by educating your organization on the key performance indicators the company has been tracking and managing. So in many places I have seen there is a complete disconnect between the KPIs that are tracked at the C-suite level and the people at the ground level. Most of them are completely unaware of what metrics that are being used. If the whole organization is talking about a single set of metrics, that improves the data literacy in the organization. In one place where I saw was the data literacy being very high is my former company, General Electric, where we used even terms such as net promoter score. Everybody in the organization, when Jack Welch is talking about net promoter score, everybody understands what he's talking about. So how these metrics have been calculated and presented, that's very important. And the last one is data monetization. How do you do this? Look at the whole value chain, number one. Look at your analytics initiatives, not as projects, but as products, and so on and so forth. Improve the data quality and all those things. So these are the three major advice which I have. Reduce dark data, improve data literacy with KPIs, and data monetization and with better data products, with looking at the whole value chain, and so on and so forth.
What a great summary. Holy smokes, that was it. It covered it all in about 2 minutes. Thank you for that. That's amazing. Before we close, a couple things, or one thing for sure. Is there any specific tips you'd give to the CFO about data analytics? Is there anything, you just gave us, three really good ways to start and what to look at. Is there anything else, any message you'd want to give the CFO who is, working in data analytics, and what from your perspective, either where we're really missing the boat or what we can really leverage?
Yeah, but not just for the CFOs, for any leader who is looking at leveraging data and analytics for business performance. The first thing is the data and analytics is not a technology endeavor per se. It's not about implementing Tableau or Spotfire or SaaSwire or all those things. The first thing is you need to have good data, and you have to answer, and you have to know what questions you need answers for. So no data, no analytics. No data, no questions means no analytics. That's the first thing. The next one, number two, is I took a course at Kellogg a few years back, and in that the professor says data analytics is more like a compass. It is a GPS. So what does it, in my words, it means analytics is more about subjectivity. It's not a deterministic process. So it is always evolving. Just like the business is evolving all the time, the analytics process is also evolving. As they say, perfection is the opposite of progression. That typically applies to analytics as well. So be open. If there is no good population data, look for sample data. If your hypothesis is not if your hypothesis is not robust, see whether you can rework on your hypothesis and see what you can do to get those insights. If your accuracy is bad, look at ranges, look at confidence intervals. Bottom line is keep moving. You need to move forward. So you can't wait for a perfect state of data and everything to do your analytics project. You need to adapt, because the business itself is an adaptable entity. Bottom line, just like they say perfection is opposite of progression, that applies very much to analytics as well. So be flexible, be open, be ready to embrace change.
Fantastic. Would you take both your books and put them in front of the screen? What I'll do is I'll make sure that people can have access to those. I assume they're on Amazon. People can get them on Amazon, or we'll figure that out. So I really appreciate your time. We'll make sure that link is there. And this kind of concludes our CFO Ed Talk. But man, did you pack it in, Prashanth? Really want to thank you. So this wraps up today's CFO Talk. Thank you, Prashanth, for joining us. CFO.University.
Steve. Yeah, great questions. I loved answering those questions. Very thought-provoking. So I had to put on my thinking hat and
Yeah, well,
And I hope it's all useful for your for the CFOs.
well, I think you gave us an awful lot to contemplate, an awful lot to act on. So thank you for that. CFO University is a community of member scholars, companies, and trusted advisors committed to the professional development of chief financial officers. Learn more about us at www.cfo.university. Until next time, enjoy, learn, engage.